She woke before dawn, a dull anxiety humming in her chest like an echo from a dream. It was as if, in her sleep, she'd heard her own heartbeat slow to a hesitant rhythm, and now something felt off, like the familiar cadence of her morning had vanished. A faint strip of light crept through the edge of an unpulled curtain, casting a soft glow on the corner cabinet. The moment she remembered she would be continuing her quiet investigation today, a wave of confusion stirred within her again. There was no going back to sleep. Stretching, she rose from the bed. Everything in her small studio apartment felt more claustrophobic than it had a week ago. The walls seemed to press in. Familiar objects irritated her. Even the low hum of the old fridge grated on her nerves. A place that once felt safe, even comforting, now felt like a cell, one where there was no escape from the thoughts of her mother and her sister. She had planned to leave early. Today, she was visiting her Aunt Toni, her mom's cousin, who lived a couple towns away in a quieter part of New Jersey. Toni had been the last close relative to stay in touch with her mother, keeping a strong bond all the way to the end. Her mother used to call Toni overly sentimental and talkative, and that memory now made the daughter think if anyone were to let something slip about the reasons behind that strange will, it would be her. She just needed patience. To listen without judgment, without accusation, just to understand. As she brewed coffee on the old electric stovetop, her mind returned to the conversation with her sister. The memory was vivid, the two of them crying in the kitchen while her nephews, too young to understand, crawled toward them, wiping their wet cheeks with tiny palms. Images of their shared childhood flooded back. First days of school, September bouquets of gladiolus, summer trips to the coast where they compete to see who could stay underwater longest. But those memories now shimmered with a bitter hue. A crack had appeared between them, sudden, sharp, undeniable. And yet, she didn't see her sister as the enemy. In truth, the younger woman was trying to hold the family together. She was exhausted, raising two kids alone, money always tight, the weight of everything pressing down. So, she had clung to the apartment like a lifeline. Still, it hurt, knowing their mother had written her, the older daughter, out of the will in secret. That wound was fresh and deep. The bus ride to Toni's town took a little over an hour, and she spent the trip watching the spring landscape waking up. Trees were still mostly bare, but green buds peeked out here and there, and the morning sun glinted off old utility wires, lighting up tiny drops of dew. She wished she could view the world with the same quiet acceptance, without questions, without ache, but her soul was restless. She stepped off at the corner stop and walked past modest homes with tidy yards and low chain-link fences. Aunt Toni's gate was framed by a large lilac bush, bare for now, but with visible buds. In the past, she'd visited in late May and clipped a few fragrant sprigs to bring to her mother's room. Uncle Stan opened the door. Slim and a little stooped, he smiled warmly, wiping his hands on a worn canvas apron before gesturing her inside. Toni was at the dining table, sitting on a wooden bench, sorting through old letters and black-and-white photos in weathered shoeboxes. Her face was set in quiet concentration. "Sweetheart," Toni said as she stood and hugged her. "I was waiting for you. I heard you've been struggling with the apartment thing." "Yeah. It didn't happen by accident." A dull tightening gripped her chest. Maybe this was it, the moment she'd get answers. Or maybe it would only deepen the wound. She sat beside her aunt, who nodded solemnly and pulled an envelope from the pile. She handed it over. "Your mother sent me this letter when she first started thinking about the will," Toni said. "I didn't throw it out. I didn't burn it even though she asked me to. I know it's not really my place to interfere, but I couldn't stand the idea of you never knowing what she was feeling when she made that choice. Maybe reading it will bring you a little peace." Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the yellowed page. The ink had faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable, her mother's, neat, exact, deliberate. "Dear Toni," it began. "I'm writing with a heavy heart because I know what I'm about to do may hurt my eldest daughter. And I fear she may never forgive me. But I'm so scared for the younger one, for her and the kids. I always thought my oldest would be fine. She's strong, capable, self-sufficient. She always figures things out. But the younger one, she never seems to catch a break. Her marriage fell apart. She's alone. Raising two kids. Struggling. I keep thinking if I split the apartment, they'll end up crammed in a one-bedroom with unreliable child support. That's not the life I want for them. Their father and I always planned to leave everything to both girls. But he passed, and I see now how complicated things have become. I'm afraid if we start down a legal path, the sisters will fight. Or worse, the place gets sold and they both lose. Money ruins families. I'd rather everything go to the one who needs it more. My oldest, she's my heart. Of course she is. But she has her own place, her job, and still a chance at happiness. God willing. Just promise me, Tony, if something happens, remind her how much I love her. I just couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. I was afraid she'd be hurt. Please don't judge me. The letter trailed off abruptly, unfinished. Maybe her mother had been interrupted. Maybe she had simply lost the nerve to continue. But the most important things had already been written. She read those lines again and again, fighting back tears. Her mother had called her my heart, but had still chosen silence over honesty. How many times had she heard her mom say, "You're my strong one. You can handle anything. Just take care of yourself." Those words, once comforting, now stung, not because they weren't true, but because they had carried an invisible burden. "Forgive her, honey," Tony said gently, her voice trembling with emotion. She never thought the illness would take her that fast. She kept putting off the hard conversations, thinking there'd be more time. She truly believed she could explain it all one day. "I know," she replied, barely above a whisper. "But it still hurts." Her voice cracked. "It hurts that she made the choice without me, like my opinion didn't matter." Tony nodded, her eyes soft. "It mattered. Just not the way you needed it to. Your mom believed you'd be okay. She didn't think it would break you. That might have been her greatest mistake." They sat together in silence, the air thick with old grief and new understanding. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere across the street, a rooster crowed at the wrong hour, a comic interruption that neither of them acknowledged. Tony folded the letter and set it gently on the table in front of her niece, not reclaiming it. A quiet offering. The message was clear, it was hers to keep if she wanted. She nodded quickly, tucked it into her bag like a precious fragment of truth, and exhaled. It was a piece of the puzzle she didn't even know she needed, one that didn't make everything right, but explained what had seemed inexplicable. After the visit, she stepped outside and walked slowly around the house. The backyard was modest, lined with old apple trees just beginning to bud. On one low branch, a birdhouse hung, likely Uncle Stan's spring project. It was still empty but ready. The air smelled of wet soil and chilled breeze. For the first time in days, her chest loosened just a little. The words from the letter replayed in her mind, offering a strange comfort. Her mother hadn't stopped loving her. She had simply, tragically, let fear override openness. She had loved quietly, clumsily, with that generational sense of sacrifice that preferred silence over confrontation. But wasn't real love also about trust? About the courage to say, "This might hurt, but I want to say it anyway"? If her mother had just looked her in the eye and said, "I want to give the apartment to your sister," maybe, just maybe, it would have been easier. Or at least more honest. On the way back, something within her began to soften toward her sister. She saw now her sister hadn't plotted this. She hadn't manipulated their mother. She had simply received what was offered, torn between guilt and relief. She'd been swept up in it, unsure how to respond. And maybe, deep down, grateful. They were both daughters. Both wounded. And now both responsible for what came next. Back home, she sat in the entryway of her apartment, still wearing her coat, staring at the old collage of family photos on the wall. One in particular stood out, the four of them together, she, her sister, their mom and dad, all smiling. Her mother's arm wrapped around both daughters. A snapshot from some summer barbecue. She stared at it and thought, if only people understood how much damage is done by the words they never say. The next day, she dialed her sister's number. There was tension in her voice, but not the kind fueled by blame. She asked if they could talk. Said she had something to share. Her sister agreed, sounding cautious but open. They met that evening. The kids were at a neighbor's, so the apartment was quiet for once. This time, the silence wasn't cold, it felt like space for something long overdue. "I went to see Aunt Tony," she said, sitting down on the couch. "She showed me something. A letter. From Mom. Do you want to read it?" Her sister froze, then gave a quick nod. When she saw the familiar handwriting, her lips parted slightly. As she read, her eyes filled with tears. After a long pause, she finally whispered. "She told me the same thing. That you'd be fine, that you were strong. That I needed the apartment more. I always looked up to you, you know? You were the one who had everything figured out." She swallowed hard. "And I thought Mom loved you more. You had the kids. You had her attention. I guess we both misunderstood each other." Her sister gave a faint laugh through tears and reached for her. They embraced, for the first time in what felt like forever, and it felt real. Like childhood again. Like the end of a long, bitter winter. "I'm not asking you to take any money," her sister said quietly, pulling back. "But if you ever want help, even just with your bathroom renovation, I'd really like to contribute." "I mean it." She had once bristled at the thought of accepting anything. It had felt like charity, like a bribe. But now she could see the offer for what it was, a peace offering. An act of care. A small way to reconnect. She exhaled. "Maybe we can talk about it. Honestly, I was thinking about redoing the place. And you're right, that bathtub's a nightmare. They both laughed, a real laugh this time. The heaviness in the room lightened just a little. Later that night, she reread the letter again alone, sitting on the floor of her apartment. Her heart still ached, but it beat a little steadier. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, healing wasn't some unreachable place in the future. It had already begun. She waited a few days before making the decision. The ache still flared at night, especially when the apartment was quiet and her thoughts filled the silence like floodwater. Sleep had been shallow, and when it came, it brought dreams that left her tangled, fragments of her mother's face, flickers of unfinished conversations, moments where she begged her for answers but got only silence. That Saturday, with the sky pressed low and gray, she got up early, bundled herself in a raincoat, and took the bus to the cemetery alone. Her sister couldn't come, both kids had caught colds. But truthfully, she needed the solitude. It had to be her and her mother now. No interruptions. A soft drizzle began just as she stepped off at the gate. The wind smelled of wet leaves and cold iron. She walked along the slick pathways, avoiding puddles, dodging broken twigs, her boots squelching softly on the gravel. The gravestone was simple, clean, just her parents' names carved side by side. No flowers, just a few withered stems, probably left by her sister the week before. She knelt and began tidying up. Pulled away bits of grass. Adjusted the loose edge of the plaque. All the while, her chest tightened, her throat thickened. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked under the weight of everything she had never said. "Mom, why did you do it this way?" Her breath caught. "You knew I would have understood. I would have accepted it. So why didn't you just tell me?" No answer came, of course not. Just the wind brushing through the skeletal branches of the birches above, making them creak like old doors. She lowered her head and whispered, "I wasn't asking for much. Just to be included. To not be blindsided like I didn't matter." She stood in the misting rain, heart thudding, eyes burning, and something inside her began to shift. A quiet realization. She loved me, she thought. But she was afraid. Afraid I'd be hurt. Afraid she'd make it worse. And maybe she was right. Maybe a conversation would have brought shouting, crying, accusations. Maybe it would have ended in anger. But it would have been honest. Human. Too many people choose silence over discomfort. Her mother had, thinking she was protecting them both. In truth, she'd only prolonged the pain. Standing at the grave, her voice now steadier, she said, "I forgive you." And then, after a pause, softer, "Forgive me too, for not telling you more often how much I loved you. For being too proud. Too distant." Something in her chest released, like a knot finally untied. Her cheeks were wet, rain and tears indistinguishable, but for the first time, the crying didn't feel like unraveling. It felt like emptying. Clearing space. That night, back home, the dreams came again. But this time, they were different. She dreamed her mother was sitting at their old kitchen table, wearing her favorite cardigan, sipping tea. The window behind her glowed golden with late afternoon light. She looked up, smiled, and said nothing. Just smiled, warm, knowing, sad and gentle all at once. She woke up with that image etched into her heart. From then on, something within her began to heal. Not instantly, not completely. But the sharp edges of grief dulled into something quieter. Something she could carry without bleeding. Work picked up. Her manager praised her leadership and handed her a new project, something with visibility, a team to supervise, a budget to control. The responsibility was heavy, but she found herself rising to it with a calm she hadn't known she possessed. Her sister started stopping by on weekends, often with the boys in tow. They would sort old photos, remember birthdays, laugh about childhood quirks. It wasn't perfect, sometimes awkward silences still crept in, but the cracks were being filled. Slowly. One day, while digging through an old drawer in their mother's hutch, they found a small velvet pouch tucked behind a stack of linens. Inside were a pair of tarnished silver earrings, delicate spirals, worn with time. "I remember these," her sister said. She used to wear them on special occasions. Said they were a gift from Dad on their anniversary. They had lain untouched for years, forgotten when her mother's ears grew too sensitive for jewelry. "You should keep them," her sister added softly. "They suit you. And I think she'd like that." She turned the earrings over in her fingers, feeling their quiet weight. It was like holding a memory. Maybe that's what grief was, not a wound that healed, but a place that softened, reshaped by time and love. In the weeks that followed, they began discussing the renovation again. Her sister insisted on helping pay, especially for the bathroom, which was falling apart. For once, she didn't resist. They agreed on a modest budget and found a local contractor through mutual friends. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough. As the work began, her apartment transformed into a construction zone, dust, tools, tarps everywhere. She escaped to the office during the day, returning each evening to check on the progress. And one evening, just as she was wiping grout dust off her kitchen floor, her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. It was a woman conducting a survey on family values, part of a university study on inheritance and household dynamics. The questions were oddly specific. What do you believe is more important in family relationships, emotional closeness or financial support? How should parents approach distributing their assets when children are in different life situations? At what point should adult children be included in estate decisions? At first, she answered vaguely. But midway through, something in her cracked. She began to speak clearly, passionately, truthfully. I think parents should be honest with their children, she said. Even if it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Secrets don't protect anyone, they just delay the pain. And once someone's gone, you can't ask questions anymore. There was silence on the other end. Then the woman thanked her for her honesty. She hung up feeling strange, raw, but lighter. It had been the first time she'd spoken those truths aloud to a stranger. And it felt like shedding skin. Each day, a little more peace returned. She began to notice small joys again, a coworker's compliment, the smell of fresh laundry, the sound of her nephews playing in the living room. Her sister still offered help, sometimes with money, sometimes just by showing up. They didn't pretend the past didn't happen. But they didn't live in it anymore either. The silver earrings, once hidden away, became part of her routine. She wore them on Mondays, her quiet way of carrying her mother's memory into the week. And every so often, while washing her face or making tea, she'd catch her reflection and see something new, not a daughter abandoned, not a woman wronged, but someone who had walked through loss and come out, somehow, softer. The renovation wrapped up faster than expected. The new tile in the bathroom gleamed. The old tub had been replaced, the fixtures modern and clean, and even the lighting felt different, brighter, warmer. It wasn't just a physical transformation. It felt like something had shifted in her life, too. The apartment no longer carried the same weight. It no longer whispered constantly of what had been lost. Her sister insisted on a celebration, even if it was just the two of them and the kids. She arrived that Saturday afternoon carrying a pizza box in one hand, a bottle of sparkling cider in the other, and a pair of grinning little boys trailing behind her. We brought champagne, her sister joked, waving the kid-friendly bottle. For the grand bathroom reveal. The nephews raced to the hallway, giggling as they pushed the door open to admire the shiny faucets, the soft-closed toilet seat, the new towels neatly hung. Their excitement was contagious. She laughed genuinely as she watched them scamper back and forth, narrating their discoveries like museum guides. The four of them sat on the living room floor, paper plates in hand, slices of pizza balanced carefully. It reminded her of those old evenings at their parents' place, mismatched chairs around the dining table, voices layered over each other, arguments and laughter indistinguishable. At one point, her sister raised her glass. I know Mom isn't here, she said, voice softening, but I hope wherever she is, she sees that we're still together. Still family. She looked at her sister, and there was something new in her eyes, not just apology, not just relief. Something like a vow? Let's promise something, her sister continued. No more silence. No more walking on eggshells. If something hurts, we talk. Okay. She nodded. Okay. Their eyes locked. It wasn't a toast, but it felt like a kind of oath, one their mother might have wished for but never asked them to make. The sun was setting, casting a golden light through the window. The boys were sprawled on the floor playing with toy cars. The cider was warm now, but no one minded. The room smelled of pizza and shampoo and fresh paint. Of home. And in that light, everything looked softer. Kinder. The weeks that followed were calmer. More grounded. She and her sister talked regularly now about small things mostly. Work, the kids' school, grocery sales, who had the better mechanic. But sometimes those little things said more than big conversations ever could. One evening, while dusting the bookshelf, she spotted an old photo frame tucked behind a stack of papers. It held a picture she hadn't noticed in years, she and her mother at the beach, both squinting into the wind, laughing at something unseen. Her mother's arm was wrapped around her shoulders. They looked like friends, not just mother and daughter. She didn't cry when she saw it. She smiled. The grief wasn't gone. But it had changed. It no longer stabbed. It rested in her like a scar, visible, sometimes sore, but no longer bleeding. And then one ordinary weekday, she got a text from her sister. The kids are performing in a spring concert at school next Thursday. Would love for you to come if you're free. They'd be so happy to see you. A year ago, she might have hesitated. She might have said she was busy or pretended she hadn't seen it. But this time, she didn't think twice. Of course I'll come, she typed back. I should probably bring gifts for my favorite little musicians. The reply was almost instant. You're the best. Seriously. She looked up from her phone, caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She was wearing the silver earrings her mother's and a warm sweater that made her feel like herself. There was still a part of her that missed her mom every single day. But now she could carry that feeling without letting it crush her. She had found peace. Not because she forgot, but because she remembered with grace. The elementary school gym smelled like floor polish and crumpled programs. Folding chairs were lined up in neat rows filled with restless parents and grandparents, some already fanning themselves with sheets of paper. A string of pastel decorations ran along the walls, paper flowers, glittered letters spelling out spring showcase. She found her seat toward the back, just early enough to avoid a rush but not so early that she had to sit and wait long. As she scanned the crowd, her heart did a small flutter, a mix of nerves and unfamiliar hope. She hadn't been in a setting like this in years. Not since her sister's wedding. Not since everything shifted. Then she spotted them, her sister and the boys near the front, the youngest tugging at his too-tight collar, the older one waving wildly when he saw her. She waved back, smiled, and mouthed, "Good luck." His grin widened. The lights dimmed. Someone tapped a microphone and then the music began. It wasn't flawless. Some kids forgot their lines, a couple burst into tears mid-song, and one particularly brave boy loudly declared he needed to be halfway through a poem. But it was beautiful. Honest. Human. And when her nephew stepped forward, nervously clutching a cardboard guitar, her sister leaned back to look at her, their eyes meeting across the rows of folding chairs. There it was again, not apology, not regret, but the quiet strength of shared experience. A bond reforged. He strummed the wrong chord. She clapped the loudest anyway. Afterward, the hallway outside the gym filled with noise, kids tugging parents toward bake sale tables, families posing for photos near balloons, teachers trying to herd classes into some form of order. Her sister found her first. The boys ran ahead, waving cookies and juice boxes like trophies. "You came," she said, breathless, smiling. "You didn't have to, but thank you." "I wanted to," she replied. "It was important." He was great. They stood in the hallway a moment, both holding the edges of paper programs. A current of people passed them on both sides, parents with backpacks, toddlers on shoulders, teachers giving high fives, but in that little bubble of stillness, everything else faded. Her sister tilted her head. "You're wearing Mom's earrings." She reached up, touched her ear. "Yeah. I thought it was time." "She'd be glad you kept them." "I think so too." The boys tugged at their mom's sleeve. "Can we go get ice cream now?" "You said." She looked at her sister. "Come with us." And that was it, no ceremony, no formal forgiveness. Just a question. An invitation. A beginning. They walked to the parking lot together, kids skipping ahead. The night air was crisp but not cold. A few early stars had started to pierce the sky. Her sister's car was parked beside hers, their doors nearly touching, a quiet reminder of how close they'd always been, even when it didn't feel that way. Later, after ice cream, after hugs and laughter and chocolate stains on sleeves, she returned home. The apartment was quiet again, not heavy this time, but restful. She placed her purse on the hook, kicked off her shoes, and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows. A breeze moved the trees. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked. She leaned back in the chair and let the moment settle. The ache was still there. It probably always would be. But the sharpness had dulled into something she could live with, something she could understand. Her grief wasn't a void anymore. It was a landscape she had learned to walk through. Sometimes muddy, sometimes overgrown, but no longer impossible. She picked up the framed photo of her mother, the one from the beach, still tucked beside her bookshelf, and held it for a long time. "You were scared," she said aloud. "So was I. But I'm okay now." "We're okay." She didn't need a reply. The silence felt full, not empty. She stood, walked to the bathroom, turned on the new light. The room glowed softly, clean, calm, new. And in the mirror, she saw herself. Not someone broken. Not someone left behind. A woman standing on the other side of sorrow, a little older, a little wiser. She smiled. Because life didn't erase the past. But it carried you forward anyway. And somehow that was enough. If you enjoyed the story, give it a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.